As Jews in the pews, what exactly are we supposed to do when we're praying? Are we supposed to read the exact words of the liturgy as they're written, the beautiful poetry read like a novel? Or are we supposed to pour out our hearts before God, saying something more spontaneous, more integral to ourselves and our own heart's yearnings? Well, it turns out that this question that all of you may have wondered while sitting in the pews of a synagogue is in fact an ancient debate, going back all the way to the time of the Torah. In the Torah, there are priests and there are prophets modeling two different ways of prayer. The priests had a very regimented and exacting system of sacrifices, which was the Jewish form of prayer at the time. The sacrifices had to happen at a specific time of day, in a specific order, according to specific laws. And yet the prophets would speak spontaneously when they were called, crying out to God or perhaps to the Israelites about what they saw in the world, reacting to their situation. This debate continues in the time of the rabbis, as in the Mishnah, early rabbis debated about whether the Amidah, our daily standing prayer, was supposed to be specific 18 blessings with formulaic words, or whether the essence of that Amidah was only accomplished by pouring out our hearts to God, and that if one had not expressed one's own yearnings, one had not truly prayed. This was a debate that was left somewhat open-ended in the Mishnah. In medieval times, Maimonides comes and declares that, in fact, the answer to this debate was that we must recite these 18 blessings, or later on 19, in their order, 3 times a day, and this was the essence of our mitzvah, our commandment to pray. Yet another medieval scholar, Maimonides, disagrees and says that the essence of prayer, as shown by the prophets and also our forefathers and foremothers, is pouring out one's heart to God, crying out about one's specific yearnings and the desires and longings of one's own life. And so we see generation after generation a debate about whether prayer in Judaism is about saying specific words that God has perhaps commanded in some sense, or calling out about our specific yearnings and longings and becoming a kind of friend to God. So the Rabbi Zalman's Shachter Shalomi, who came to the US in the 60s, spoke a lot about this in his talks on what he called davenology, or renewing our connection to prayer. And he says that the words of the Siddur are very important, and we do need to say them as they're said in the Siddur. And yet the words themselves are not nearly enough. He calls them freeze-dried prayer. He said these words capture the experiences of those who wrote them, King David in the Psalms and various other liturgists over time. But then, by being captured on pen and paper, they became freeze-dried. And so he says, if you were hungry and I offered you some freeze-dried powder soup, would you feel sated? Certainly not. You would say, add a little hot water. So what is that hot water, he says? It's feeling, emotion, and our own personal experience of spirituality. So on this Shabbat, I hope that we can add hot water to our freeze-dried prayer, that we can take the words of the Siddur and add to them our own experience, our own yearning, to lift our prayers to a higher, more spiritual level. Shabbat Shalom.